We've been church for about 14 years. And when did you start coming, Kristen? 2006. Kristen, who was part of our Shoreline team for a long time, she was here. And then you met your husband, Graham. And Graham was like Air Force trash. Not that Air Force is trash, but no, I'm not saying that. Here's what I'm saying. He was a mess when we found him. It was like something out of Pretty Woman. And we fixed him up. We turned him into a man of God. He met Kristen in the youth ministry, which, by the way, if you're single, that's where you meet your future spouses, in youth ministry. How many met their spouse in youth ministry? Okay, you did? Okay. You did? All right. So a few of them. He's from Alabama. He doesn't count because it was his cousin. Anyhow, I'm on a roll here. Don't stop me. Great Scott. Anyhow, so we pulled Graham out of the gutter. We fixed him up. He met this beautiful woman in youth ministry. They got married. He was our youth pastor for a long time, but then he got lured out to California with the lure of fame and glory. And they went out to California to be a volleyball star, and then he became a youth pastor out there. And we kept begging him to come home. Well, finally, the prodigal son has returned. Graham and his lovely wife, Kristen, they have now agreed to join our staff. They've moved here from California. They're melting right now in this humidity. But Graham, for his first test as our associate pastor, he's going to be bringing the message today for Jesus Is. So make sure you give a big welcome, prodigal son home. Welcome to Pastor Graham Cowgill.
This thing on? Nice. What's up, guys? Man, I did not know I was that big of a mess before. Good night. Everybody's just like, wow, Graham, we would have thought you'd be dead by now. Good to see you. I'm like, really? Okay. Well, it is really nice to be here. This past week has been insanity. My family and I, we've moved from Huntington Beach, California here in this past week. And you guys know that moving sucks. It is awful. Moving houses is bad enough. Moving across the country with 3 young kids that you don't even really like, to be honest, it's brutal. Here's a pic of the fam, because nothing gets you trust better than a pic of the fam. All right, so there's my beautiful wife, Kristen. She looks even better in person. She's right here front row. Way to go. And then those are the 3 little crumb snatchers. The tall one is Gage. He's 6. The size of your average 22-year-old. And then we got twin 3-year-olds, boy-girl twins. Tatum is the girl, she runs the house. And then Jace is kind of our wild card. Nobody really knows. Jace is me before I left, apparently. It just, like, what's gonna happen with this kid? I wanted to give you a little bit of insight on our psyche for the move, just because it has been a crazy transition. Started about maybe a month and a half, 2 months ago. But maybe it helps you. Transition, right, is anything. It's going into the unknown. So it can be moving across the country. It can be, junior high to high school to college, getting married, having a baby, whatever. Changing jobs, changing job positions. I was talking to somebody and they said, oh, we're moving in the house next to our parents because parents are getting older and we need to take care of them. I was like, that's transition, right? Anything that is an unknown. And so this was the first monumental transition that I had that I was actually able to kind of articulate the process. So I thought I'd share it. It'll give you good insight into our psyche, and maybe this helps you out a little bit. About a month and a half ago, 2 months, Kristen actually posed a question to me. And she said, hey, what do you think about moving to Florida? And for the first time in a long time, it hit me differently. And I don't even know how to really say that. I guess maybe the check in the spirit is a way to say it, but it was just like, okay, there's something there, enough that we need to pray about it. And so Kristen and I did. We prayed a lot about it. And the more we prayed about it, the more we thought about it, the more peace we felt about it. And it almost switched from peace to like conviction. where God is like, this is what I have for you. Like, I think God's calling us to Florida. So at that moment, this transition process started. And the very first step in that for me was grief. Not grief for where I was going. We love this area and are excited, but grief for what I was giving up. 10 years over there, and there were incredible friendships and, relational equity in the city and volleyball there in the area. Like, we loved it all. And really what grief means to me is emotional honesty. Right? Just being honest with God and saying, God, if you're going to be the one who's going through me with this, or going through this situation with me, if you're healing me through this, if you're walking me through it, then I don't want there to be any emotional stone unturned. I don't want to get to the place and think, oh man, I didn't think about that. If I'd thought about that, would my decision have been different? Right? You want this conviction about it. And so I said, God, I'm going to put it all out there. And I grieved for a while. But at some point, it switched. And it went from grief to gratitude. And I just would walk around and I would walk down the street of where we lived and I would say, man, God, I'm so thankful for this season. I'm so incredibly thankful for what you have blessed our family with. And for the friendships that I was leaving, I was so thankful for those. And the way that we grew together as a couple, I'm thankful for that. Our family started there. And I loved that area. And I just said, God, thank you for this beautiful season you've allowed me to have. Then, not really as a wrap-up, but kind of, and the very next step in the process for me was excitement. All right, God, get me excited for this next step. Would you stir my heart for this? Make me passionate about this next step that you have. And I don't know what your transition looks like. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't look like moving across the country. But let's take that example of moving, either having your parents move in or moving close to your parents. It can be daunting, right? Not all transitions are this is just all thumbs up. It can be daunting. But we can still have this prayer that says, God, if this is something that you're doing, if this is something that you are orchestrating and putting in my life, I can fall in love with it. There's got to be something that fulfills me, something that I can get excited about. And when we began to pray that, he began to almost tear my heart open a little bit, and I began to get excited. And he kind of answered the prayer differently than I thought he would. First thing he did was I just went to Shoreline's website, and I opened up the website, went to the homepage, and read, changing people's perception of God by changing their perception of church. And I thought, what an absolutely beautiful vision statement. How beautiful is that? How many people are there that have no idea how much God loves them because of their preconceptions of church? And a church that says our unique vision is to just get rid of all the obstacles. We want to be a church where we're not going to get in the way. You can come here and you can experience very purely God's love for you. And I got excited for that, to join that, to be a part of that. And then that is, yes, we want a healthy, thriving church. But then he got me excited in this macro vision of the area, the Panhandle, Pensacola to Panama City. He said, look, Shoreline is not the only church that hears from me, right? And I've given Shoreline a unique vision, but it's not the right vision. It's your unique vision. He has given great vision to other churches around here, and he orchestrates the placement of those and the placement of different people so that kind of our Venn diagrams overlap this whole area, right? And we're just encompassing this area with grace and love. And I got stoked about playing our role inside of this church in the greater story that God is writing for the area. And I started to get the tingles, and I started to shadow box in the mirror a little bit. And I was like, let's go. So I'm just going to tell you, I'm showing up a little pumped up. I'm a little excited now, right? Which is annoying. I get that. You ever played pickup basketball and 5 games in, there's a guy that shows up with fresh legs who gets all the rebounds? You're like, bro, tone it down, dude. Who? That's me. I'm the rebound guy right now. I get that. But I just wanted to say with full conviction that my family and I are walking in so excited to be a part of what God has continued to do through Shoreline, the way that he has met tangible needs in this community through us. And it really does excite me to see what he has for this next season. One of the ongoing series that we've had at Shoreline is Jesus Is, where we look at different characteristics of Jesus and Why are those important? Why should we embody those? And so the one that we're looking at today is Jesus is inclusive, is what I titled today's sermon. And I know that's kind of a loaded word. We'll unpack it as we go. A while back, a buddy of mine recommended this book to me. It's called The Mud and the Masterpiece. It's a book by a guy named John Burke. He's a lead pastor in Austin, Texas. And in this book, John goes to St. Petersburg, Russia, to the Hermitage. And there's this painting there by Rembrandt, and it's titled The Return of the Prodigal Son. Maybe you've heard the story before, but in the story, two young sons, and the younger son goes to his dad and says, Dad, hey, this whole father-son thing isn't doing it for me. Really, all you're worth to me is the inheritance money when you die. So if you can give me that money, I'm out of the family, and it breaks the father's heart. The father's a good father who loves his son very much. But he obliges and gives the money to his son. And so, huge sum of money. Guy says, I'm out, takes it, goes to this foreign land, and goes bananas, right? He's got entourage and bottle service and prostitutes, parties, the whole 9 yards, right? Just goes completely nuts. But when the money runs out, the friends run out, and very quickly he finds himself literally in the gutter. Starving, broke, desperate, pretty defeated. And kind of on the verge of death, he thinks to himself, man, even the people back at my father's estate, the servants, eat. And so his plan is, I'm going to go back to my dad and say, look, I know I'm out of the family, but if you would hire me on as one of your servants, it would save my life. And so he starts this long trek back to the dad, and what he doesn't know is that the father every day had been scanning the horizon, hoping and praying that his son would return home. And father gets up, same as he does every day, looks out, only this time he sees his son crest the hill and come towards him. And here's the man of power and position, and he just becomes undignified. And he just runs to his son, throws his arms around him, kisses him, and says, my son has returned home. This is the scene that Rembrandt decides to paint in the painting. And actually, there's a picture of the painting. We can throw it up there. You see the tattered clothes of the son. And what a beautiful scene that he decided to paint. Here's John's illustration in the book, which, by the way, go for the book. It's phenomenal. But he says, imagine you're there in St. Petersburg at the Hermitage. You're walking by the building in an alleyway, and you see this dumpster. And as you're walking by, you see a painting that's tucked in there, and you're like, hold on a second. You get a little bit closer, and you see, oh my gosh, that's the painting. That's Rembrandt's Return of the Prodigal Son. And you have to move some things, and the painting's torn a little bit. It's got some mud on it, but it's the painting. It's the original. And so his question in the book is, all right, you got to make this call in the moment. Do you see the mud or the masterpiece? All right? So, especially in that situation, the majority of us say, yeah, we see the masterpiece. We'd probably take the painting out, probably not even trust ourselves to clean it off, right? Just wait until someone who knows what they're doing can mend the tear, but just keep it safe because we recognize its value. So the question is, when you look at people, what do you see? What do you see? Do you see people that are beautifully, intentionally designed by God, whose personalities and gifts are woven into who they are? Do you see masterpieces by the master artist? Or do we see the mud, right? Do we see the life decisions? Do we see the missed opportunities? Do we see the screw-ups? What do we see? When you look in the mirror, what do you see? Do we see broken commitments, broken promises? Do we see the screw-ups, the failures? Do we see that decision that we made that we swore we'd never make? Or do you see a masterpiece? Do you see somebody created in the image of God? Do you see somebody who God hasn't given up on? Somebody that God has incredible good for, that has a wonderful future plan for? What do we see? What we see makes all the difference in the world. And today we're going to look at a story that shows the difference between how Jesus sees and how this religious teacher sees. So if you got your Bible, open up to Luke 7. You can also go on the Shoreline app, read it in there, and we'll have it up on the screen. Verse 36. When one of the Pharisees invited Jesus to have dinner with him, he, Jesus, went to the Pharisee's house and reclined at the table. All right, so a little bit of background here. This was a point in Jesus' ministry where he is like confronting the religious establishment. So the Pharisees they're essentially like professional religious people. That was kind of their job. And they had set up this hierarchy so that the more you look like you have things together, right, the more your life looks good, then the more superior you are. The more people need to listen to you, the more value you add to society. Like that is the hierarchy, and it drove Jesus crazy. That's what he came to demolish. And so just Jesus' presence is this massive disruption to the religious system there. And all these Pharisees are trying to figure out, like, what do we think of Jesus? Right? Like, is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? They can't really figure him out. And so one of the Pharisees goes, all right, take one for the team here. I'm going to throw a dinner party. I'm going to invite Jesus as the guest of honor, and we can question him. Maybe we can catch him in a lie. Maybe we can catch him in a dicey situation, whatever, and just make him out to be a fraud. And so that's his idea. Throw a dinner party, have Jesus as a guest of honor. A couple things to know about the dinner parties. Number one is they don't sit on chairs around tables like we do. They would actually recline on benches. So here's a picture of what it might look like. But you'd have your feet back behind you. You'd be lean. There's no way that's comfortable, right? But whatever. And the idea was that these dinner parties would be very conversational. So they would last for hours and hours. They were like social gatherings. And another thing to know is that they were open to the public. So people could wander in, wander out. You'd have the center table. You'd have your guest of honor and the esteemed guests around the table. But around the outside of the room, you would have just people from the city. And that was like Bible time TMZ kind of, right? Like they would listen to the conversation, especially if it was political or religious. They'd listen and they'd go out to the city and go, hey, so-and-so said this. I don't know if that's how they did it, but that's how I do it. So-and-so said that. And then at the end of the meal, you'd have the poor from the city who would come in and they'd try to get some leftovers or scraps. So that is the setting that we're looking at. Verse 37, a woman in that town who lived a sinful life learned that Jesus was eating at the Pharisee's house. So she came there with an alabaster jar of perfume. All right, so important to note that this woman's sins, her screw-ups, her failures, were public info. That's how she was known. When people looked at this woman, they knew her by her sins, by her screw-ups, right? And nobody knows exactly what that is, but most people speculate maybe a prostitute or something of that nature. And then she came there with an alabaster jar of perfume. Would have been considered very, very expensive, probably passed down through family line. And the way that the jar actually is constructed, it doesn't have a lid, it's sealed on the top. And so you'd have to break this jar and use it all at once, considered very, very expensive. Verse 38, as she stood behind him, Jesus, at his feet weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears. Then she wiped them with her hair. Pause. Jewish women never let their hair down in public. That was something that was reserved for their husbands. And so here's this woman who comes here with that reputation, the promiscuous reputation. She comes up to Jesus. Everybody's like, what is she doing here? Lets her hair down to Jesus, begins to kiss his feet, and then pours perfume on him. Remember, this whole night was set up to like catch Jesus in a dicey situation. This is the diciest of all situations. Like this is as crazy as it gets. And everybody is just like full body puckered, holding their breath like, what the heck? What is the host gonna do, right? What is Jesus gonna do? Verse 39. When the Pharisee who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, so this is his inner dialogue, not out loud. If this man were a prophet, he would know who is touching him and what kind of woman she is, that she is a sinner. So this guy makes two pretty quick observations, one about Jesus, one about the woman. About Jesus, he goes, all right, well, this guy's not a prophet, right? Prophets are people who have this like supernatural connection with God, and they can see like more than meets the eye, kind of. He's like, this dude's clueless, man. He has no idea what kind of trash is touching him. So, way to go me, Mythbuster, right? Jesus is a fraud. I've done it. And then about the woman, he says, what kind of woman she is. Her nature, her identity. She is a sinner. In his mind, like this woman's past so clearly defines who she is that there cannot be a masterpiece with this woman. In his mind, she is mud, right? Not that she's muddy, she is mud. It's her identity. She is a sinner. So he thinks that everything that this woman does needs to be seen through the lens of her past, right? I don't know what's going on exactly right now, but I know it's bad because I know who she is. She is mud. When I hear that, to be honest, I'm upset at that guy, man. I'm like, Pharisee, you're being a stooge here, brother, right? I get upset. But then, when I was even preparing this message, I thought, man, we do this all the time. We do this all the time. We reduce people down to a word, down to a label, right? Have these like email folders that we create, that we have a conversation with somebody, and based on the first 3 statements, we're like, oh, you're one of those, right? And we have a filter created for them. This past week when I was moving in, I got in a conversation with a guy who lives a couple of houses down, and I was just trying to be the nice guy, meet the neighbors, but it is about 400 degrees hotter than I'm used to, so I'm on shirt number 18 at that point. I've got like 10 hours of sleep in the past 4 days, so I'm so worthless. So I just wander up to this guy, and I'm just probably looking right through him, and he introduced himself as a guest of the house. I'm a guest of the house. Are you an owner? Yes, sir. Well, I'm a guest of this house. Like, good to meet you, man. I'm Graham. And he goes, good to meet you. I'm Mike. You work at Sea Line Church? I was like, oh, yeah, at Shoreline Church, man. Just started, stoked to be there. Just wanted to say hi and good to meet you. So you're a Christian? I said, oh, yes, sir. Yep. Working at Shoreline. Anyway, great to meet you. He goes, so you believe in pre-tribunal or post-tribunal rapture? And I was like, oh, man. Whoa, Mike is coming in hot, right? All right, now, who's coming first? Jesus Christ or Antichrist? I was like, oh, buddy. I was like, dude, if you would have asked me my favorite color, that probably would have been too deep for me right now. Like, I am barely hanging on to life right now. I was like, so, dude, if it's all right, just forgive me, man. If we could put a pin in that combo, pick it up a little bit later when I know what state I'm in, that'd be great. And he just stares at me. I was like, well, all right, Mike, good to meet you. And he's like, you call me Michael. I was like, okay, all right, well, and just turned around. Like, then I got inside, I was like, holy smokes, man. I was just like wide-eyed, put my head in the freezer to cool down. And then I think I even called somebody from California. I was like, check out this intro combo. And then about 2 hours later, working on the message, and I thought, oh my gosh, I'm that guy. I'm that guy. I'm the Pharisee. And in an instant, I had judged Michael. In an instant. And I'd put him into a category, probably based on a conversation that I've had like that before. And I said, oh, you're one of those, right? And I think that the majority of time, the reason that we do that, to be honest, is that loving people is not easy. Loving people takes a lot of patience, takes a lot of time. It is way easier to dismiss people, isn't it? Way easier. And what happens is if we're looking for an excuse to dismiss somebody, then we're never looking for a reason to love somebody, right? And in this message where we're supposed to be sifting through mud to find the masterpiece, even in that time, I found my human tendency coming out. In an instant, I can judge somebody. And who the heck am I to judge somebody? You kidding me? How disgusting is that? How dare you, Graham? Just 10 years ago, apparently I was the biggest mess in the world, right? How am I supposed to judge somebody? All right, let's keep going on this story. I love this part of the story because Jesus, the non-prophet, right, according to this guy, is about to respond to this dude's inner dialogue, which is really funny. Maybe it's just funny to me. All right, verse 40. Jesus answered him, "Simon, I have something to tell you." "Tell me, teacher," he said, probably sarcastically, right? Verse 41. 2 people owed money to a certain moneylender. One owed him 500 denarii and the other 50. Neither of them had the money to pay him back. So in that culture, if you owed somebody money, it wasn't just like, "Hey, bro, whenever you can get it to me, no worries." It was a big deal. Especially this amount of money, you were probably thrown into debtor's prison, which means you're tortured and to get like sympathy from your family until they can scrounge up the money to bail you out. So it's a huge deal. So he forgave the debts of both. Now, which of them will love him more? Simon replied, "I suppose the one who had the bigger debt forgiven." "You have judged correctly," Jesus said. Then he turned toward the woman and said to Simon, "Simon, do you see this woman?" Simon's like, "Huh? Woman? No, I hadn't noticed her. Oh, that, yes, Jesus, I see the woman." And Jesus is like, No. Do you really see this woman?" And now we get to kind of read how Jesus sees. He says, "I came into your house. You did not give me any water for my feet." And that was customary at that time. They wore sandals. And so when you go to somebody's house, they'd either have the servant wash your feet or they would wash your feet. Or at the very least, they'd give you a bucket of water to wash your own feet. "You did not give me water for my feet, but she wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You did not give me a kiss," which was customary at that time. "But this woman, from the time I entered, has not stopped kissing my feet. You did not put oil on my head." Again, another custom, they'd give the guest oil to clean the dirt off of their forehead. "But she has poured perfume on my feet. Therefore, I tell you, her many sins have been forgiven, as her great love has shown. But whoever has been forgiven little loves little." Jesus says, "Dude, Simon, your problem is you don't think that you have a lot to be forgiven for. Your problem is you think you're better than this woman." Right? But this woman, in her desperation, in her honesty, she has sought me out. Now, chances are that this woman actually heard about Jesus in the community of well-known sinners. The well-known sinners, the screw-ups of the city, loved Jesus. The reason they did was because all the religious professionals had set up this hierarchy to say, hey, how put together you look determines your value. And so if you've screwed up and people know about it, then you're forgotten about. Take a hike, pal. You blew your chance. Go over in the corner and survive until you die, right? You're forgotten about. You're passed over. And then all of a sudden, Jesus comes along, and he is speaking a different message, a message about new beginnings, a message about grace, a message about love. And these people who have been ostracized and forgotten about, they start to think, does that mean us, maybe? Like, they had discounted themselves from ever having value again. And because of his message, they thought, maybe we're not too far gone. Maybe that means us. And so this woman with that reputation all of a sudden thinks, maybe this new beginning is for me. And she falls in love with the message of grace and healing and new beginning. And she says, I just got to meet Jesus. I just got to be in front of him. So she hears he's going to be at this dinner party, and she grabs the most expensive thing she owns, this alabaster jar of perfume, and she goes there and she gets to the outside to face the shame and the scorn. And maybe she gets some sneers as she's coming in, as people recognize her as that woman. As soon as she gets to the entryway, she sees Jesus, and she is unbridled. She is overcome with emotion. And ignoring custom, ignoring protocol, she just runs to him, runs to his feet, begins to weep. Grabs his feet, Remember the way that so he turns around, faces her, he grabs the feet, and she's just crying on him. And as the tears hit his feet, she can see the tears pooling in the mud. She realizes nobody's washed his feet. Nobody's washed the master's feet, right? She thinks, here's the man who has come to make me clean. The least I can do is wash his feet. And when it says that her tears wet his feet, the word in the original text there for wet is downpour. It's a thunderstorm. It is unbridled surrender, emotional surrender. And as the mud begins to wipe off, she doesn't have a towel, and so again, ignoring custom, she lets her hair down and begins to clean off his feet. And still, overcome with emotion, grabs his feet and kisses them. And that word there that's used for kiss is the same word used in the story of the prodigal son when the father kisses the son on his return. It's a raw, emotive affection. Then finally, she takes the alabaster jar of perfume and knows that it's one and done. She breaks it, pours it on his feet, and says, you deserve everything. You deserve all that I have. And what that Pharisee sees is an inappropriate display. What Jesus sees is this woman responding with absolute surrender and gratitude to this message of grace. The message that is still available for us today, right? The message essentially that says the only thing needed to be forgiven is to admit that we need it. The only thing needed is to admit that we need it, that we don't have it all together, that this life is not about hierarchy. This life is not about looking like you have things put together. This life is about humility, that there is no separation between any of us. There's no difference between you and me and the heroin addict. We are all broken and in need of a Savior. And when we can humble ourselves and just say, God, you are the God who loves, you are the God that gives grace, it is a unifying thing. It unifies us under the banner of God's love. The reason I think she was so emotional, right, is that verse 47. Whoever has been forgiven little loves little. Man, if we don't feel like there's much to be forgiven for, then we will never experience the depths of God's love for us. I want to be emotional. I want to be emotional when I think about it. Man, I screw up 100 times a day. 100 times a day, I turn my back on what God has for me. I judge when I'm supposed to love. This week, I'm preparing this message, and I judge that guy by my house, right? My life is still very, very muddy. But God responds to our mud with patience and love and grace. And God, when he looks at us, he doesn't see the mud, he sees the masterpiece. And his desire is to take us out of the trash, to mend the tears, to clean off the mud, and to restore us to himself. I titled this message, Jesus is Inclusive, because I think, to be honest, just as a human tendency, we are always looking for a reason to dismiss. We're always looking for a reason to disqualify. We're always looking for a reason to discount, to pass over. And Jesus looks for every opportunity to love, every opportunity to heal, every opportunity to mend our tears, clean off the mud, and restore us to himself. When I said earlier that I was pumped up, excited for this macro vision, this message is why. It's because I know that God makes moves for a reason, that God orchestrates things for a reason. And I truly believe that God is going to continue to use Shoreline and its unique vision in this area, that we can be extensions of his love here. The first thing we have to do maybe is take the label off of ourselves, right? You are not your mud. You are not your mud. You are not your bad decisions. You are not your screw-ups. You are not your past. You are the masterpiece that God has intentionally designed. You are God's idea. Everything about you is God's idea. And he designed us to play a very important role in the story that he's writing all around us. we begin to understand the masterpiece that we are, it informs the way that we treat other people, doesn't it? All of a sudden, we are people who sift through the mud and we can call out the masterpiece in other people. I know this is what the world says about you. I know this is what you think about you, but let me tell you what is really true about you. Because he claims you as valuable. He calls you a masterpiece. You know what a masterpiece is? That means that if God could point to anything in creation and say, hey, you want to know how good I am? You want to know how powerful and creative I am? He would show people you. You are his masterpiece. And we collectively get to walk out of here with opportunities every single day to make sure other people know that that's true about them. Let's pray. Oh, mercy, mercy, Father. I just want to thank you for today. It has been a crazy road to be back up here. And I'm just very grateful. Very grateful to share this time with these guys and those watching online, and that we all have an opportunity to play a role in the story that you are writing. Just the next conversation that we have when we leave this place, Father, would this message ring true? And we can begin calling out that God designed beauty in people. That we are people that people want to be around because when they leave a conversation with us, they know better how you feel about them. Use us, use Shoreline Church, use this area to impact eternity for people. We trust the way that you love and we trust the way that you orchestrate. In your precious name, amen.